The opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of Salem Communications, staff, management, or advertisers. Activist Radio is on the air. You've tuned into the Mark Harrington Show, sponsored by Created Equal. Mark is training a new generation of leaders to take on the culture of death and win.
All right!
If you don't like abortion, don't have one.
The only thing that can be said to be objective truth is that there is no objective truth.
It does come out in one piece. It comes out in one piece.
I would argue that we certainly are not all created equal.
And now, here's Mark.
That's right, we're back on the air. The Mark Harrington Show, Activist Radio, the voice of resistance on WRFD. And by the way, I'm a radio activist. I'm an activist. In some circles, that would be, I guess, taken in ill favor. People think, oh, what are activists? They're the guy with the bullhorn screaming and yelling at people and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's not us. If you're not an activist, that means you're not active. And I would rather be active. So I want to reclaim that word, activist. I'm not afraid of it. In fact, I think every Christian should be an activist. An activist. We're Christ followers first, but as we are a Christ follower, we are duty-bound to walk into the public square and go toe-to-toe with the notions of the day, the issues of the day that confront the biblical worldview. And I think one of the ones that are on the front line is the question of abortion choice. And that's why I've dedicated my life to defending the preborn. And we're going to be doing that today again on the Mark Harrington Show. We're going to be talking about apologetics, defending the faith as a Christian, and specifically defending the pro-life perspective here on the program. And I have two guests in my studio today. The first is Dr. Cornelius Choice. Dr. Choice, thanks for being on the program. Thank you, Mark. My second guest is Seth Drayer. And Seth is my colleague at Created Equal. Seth is the training director. Thanks for being on the program, Seth, again.
Glad to be here, Mark. Thank you.
This is our third program dealing with apologetics. I'm going to turn it over, the microphone, to my friend, and I wouldn't say he's one of my advocates, because he's not. He's on the other side. That's Dr. Cornelius Choice. Doctor, take it over. Okay, thank you, Mark. Here we go. Let's just launch right into this, Seth. This is our third session together. This has been, I hope, very helpful to Mark's listeners to understand that there aren't people that are as closed-minded as Mark. And you, by the way.
I appreciate that.
That aren't narrow-minded, bigoted, anti-choice, extreme zealots, like most people that follow Mark Harrington and others like him. That there are open-minded people.
Like you.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, we'll see.
But we can, regardless of our positions, and they are diametrically opposed, we can still have a civil discourse, also the fact that I just called you names. Other than the fact that you're kind of used to that, though.
I am.
Okay, I know, and so is Mark. And we all do it in good fun. But we can have a civil discussion about this important issue. And I come from it from a very highly intellectual, academic position, because I am a professor at Abortion U. And so let's just cover a few more of these questions for the listeners and get your perspective mostly on this. Let's just start out. We've covered a lot of issues, when life begins. We've dealt with that. We dealt with rape and incest and life of the mother arguments. We've dealt with the bodily autonomy argument that comes from advocates like myself that think women have the right to choose what to do with their own bodies. My body, my rights, my choice. We've covered whether you anti-choice extremists should be legislating morality for the rest of the country, back alley abortions, whether you would put women in jail and so forth. By the way, if you want to go back and listen to those things, you can pick those up on Mark's radio website on createdequal.net. But for today, we want to cover a couple of different issues. The first one is this. We all know the world is overpopulated, right? And we can hardly take care of the people that are already here, that are living on this earth. We got, almost 7 billion people? Isn't abortion necessary to address this overpopulation problem, Seth?
I'll grant you, Dr. Choice, your premise. I don't know if it's accurate that we really are overpopulated, but I'm just going to grant that for the sake of argument. But what you usually mean by that when I hear that word is we have a lack of resources, right, to feed the world. So you're saying that because we lack food, for example, for all the world, we can pick one segment of human beings and kill them to make room for others. That seems unfair. I mean, why, Dr. Choice, why aren't you volunteering to have yourself killed because we don't have enough food?
Wow, that's offensive.
Well, I'm just asking, why would you not do that?
Well, I'm alive. I'm here. I'm a person. They're not.
But see,
they're
again,
little blobs of...
we're
they're
back
human.
to that point.
They're human, but they're not persons in the sense that we understand it.
Well, see, we're back to that point then. If they are human persons like you, then it would be wrong to kill them. So I know we don't agree there. We can go back over that in some ways.
I think you might need to.
I mean, we all remember what we reviewed we talked about a couple of sessions ago, is that from a scientific standpoint, there's no debate today. We all know that human life begins at fertilization when a human sperm and ovum unite. We agree. Then we have the question of which humans are persons, and I would say that if you are a person, the fetus must be too, because there are only 4 differences between every fetus and you, Dr. Choice, and that falls into the acronym by Stephen Schwartz, SLED. The fetus is smaller than you are. She's less developed. She's in a different environment, and she's more dependent upon her mother than you are. But those differences of size, level of development, environment dependency have no bearing upon human value, because
so are you saying that abortion is ageism? I mean, is that the point here? Because I hear you people throw that out there. How can it be ageism when we discriminate based on age all the time? We don't let our 14-year-olds drive. We don't let 16-year-olds go into the military. You can't drink alcohol until you're 21. We do it all the time.
Sure, you're right. It is totally fair to discriminate based upon age for privileges or for what's called positive rights. Like you have the privilege of drinking, the privilege of voting for your country. You have the privilege of, we could go on and give several examples. Those are privileges, but when it comes to inherent rights, those rights that our founders called self-evident, the right to life, for being the most primary
there you go, going back to those old men and 200 years ago.
Well,
a little outdated here, Seth, in that old book you read.
So you may reject it as properly basic, but I would say the right to life is basic. It's something that is the bedrock, and it is self-evident that I don't have to. It is for all people, all times, and so therefore, I'm just saying that it's okay to discriminate for privileges. Driving, all those things, that's fair, but to discriminate for an inherent right, the right to life, would be unfair.
Okay, and we're covering some ground we covered last time. I think it's important. What makes humans different than animals? I don't see the diff. I mean, obviously, I'm not a Christian. I don't believe in God. How can you make an argument that the preborn should be protected any more than some, cat, dog, or pig?
Well, okay, 2 things. I mean, first of all, I think
if there's no God, which I don't believe there is, then what's the difference? I mean, shouldn't we all be equal?
Well, again, I'll freely admit that I believe humans are made in the image of God.
Why?
Why do I believe that, or why will I admit it?
No, why do you believe it?
Well, I believe
other than the Bible.
Certainly,
which it has to probably be the reason.
Well, we could get into some really good discussions of the beginning of the world and the creator of that. But let me just say this. Let's say you're right, Dr. Choice. Let's say you're right that all life is equal. There's no special thing about human beings. Do you believe it's wrong to kill cats, for example?
Yes.
Okay, so if it's wrong to kill living things...
Because I am an animal rights activist.
I thought you were. So why... You would be unfair to say it's wrong to kill cats, but okay to kill human fetuses.
It all comes down, and my point of view on this is that it's an issue of sentience or self-awareness. That's where I think we draw the line. Whether human or animal, we have to draw the line there. That's my position. You understand that?
I understand.
But I think as we become less Christian as a nation, more secular, it's going to be harder to prove solely based on the science. I think the science is clear. Life begins at conception, but people are going to come up with their own views as to whether a person is a person, whether it deserves rights and value, as you put it.
Sure.
I think there's a challenge on your end to do that. Now let's move on. Let's see. Here's a common argument I have, and that is, how many children have you adopted? You guys want women to carry their pregnancies to term. You tell them don't kill their children, but then you're nowhere to be found when it's all over. And yet, you won't adopt them, at least from what I can tell. I don't see Christians lining up to adopt. I mean, I think that should be part and parcel with your position.
Well, that's not accurate. I mean, there are people on our staff who've adopted. I have friends who are waiting for adoption, waiting for children, but there are very few children available now because they're being aborted. But let's say that weren't true. Let's say that no one wanted to adopt. Let's say you are correct. That would not mean abortion is okay. And what if I told you, I have a toddler at home in my house, Dr. Choice. What if I told you I'm going to kill my toddler today unless you adopt her? Would it be okay for you to say I don't want to adopt her, but still say it's wrong for me to kill her?
No.
I think so.
No, I hear you on that. I mean, it seems hypocritical, that's all. And, of course, my position as Dr. Choice, and I am a liberal Christian. I believe some of the stuff in the Bible. I pick and choose. I'm okay with that because I don't think it's written, it's inspired or anything. And I'm a professor at a liberal university. But I think that it's just hypocritical, and sometimes you Christians seem to be hypocrites. You tell people to do one thing, and then you do another. Don't kill your baby, but I won't adopt. Now, you may be right that Christians are adopting more than the rest of the culture. That's true, but what are we going to do with all these unwanted children?
Well, that's a really good question.
I mean, we got, how many abortions a year? A million and a half?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot. What are you going to do with all those?
Well, if
babies.
Those children are born, you're right. We need to be holistic about this, make a plan for them. And there are people in place working on that. We have pregnancy resource centers who are ready to help women. Like in our hometown, we have various, we have PDHC, we have Women's Care Center, and others who are helping women with the children. But what you're asking me is, I think, a burden too heavy that I don't need to bear. A burden that was asked of Lincoln and others who wanted to free the slaves. They said, we're not ready yet. We don't have in place the structure for all these black people once they've been released. And they said, well, no, it's a crime. You don't have to have the plan in place before you stop the crime. So, I mean, you may be right that we have things to prepare for, but I would also argue this. Think of the crisis we're in today financially. We don't have enough taxpayers. What if we had 50 million people living, paying into the tax system?
That'd be great because we could fund all those social programs that I support. Okay, Dr. Choice sitting in for Mark Harrington here on the Mark Harrington Show. I'm a professor at Abortion University down the road here. I teach a women's studies class and philosophy at this university. About and obviously I'm very strongly I have a strong opinion on the abortion issue, and I'm with Seth Drayer here from Created Equal, the training director. All right, let me ask you this. Well, we're going to run out of time. We're going to have to hold this one over for the next question, the next segment, and that's this. I'm going to ask you the next segment. If the child will face a life of suffering, isn't abortion the more compassionate choice? We'll hold that over for the next program, or the next segment here on the Mark Harrington Show. You can tell I'm not a radio
That's okay, Dr. Choice.
I mean,
you're not Mark Harrington.
I'm kind of stumbling over my words and stuff. We'll hand this back to Mark. Mark, go ahead and take the mic over. I'm kind of stumbling here. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Choice. You're listening to the Mark Harrington Show. Go to createdequal.net, your voice of resistance. And be praying for us, folks, as we're on the road. We're going to be taking our Justice Riders out for a week of training and outreach in July. These are 50 or so young people. Please be in prayer for us. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
What do other pro-life leaders think of Mark Harrington and Created Equal? Listen to Scott Klusendorf of Life Training Institute.
Created Equal is about changing this culture, and that's what we have to do if we are going to win this fight. And Mark and Seth and the others on the team of Created Equal are doing just that. And I am happy to endorse their work. Glad to call them fellow companions in this fight for the life of the unborn. And I certainly hope you will support and work with them as they work on reforming this culture so that it has an appreciation for human life.
Mark Harrington is a missionary and free speech advocate, and Mark has been on the front line of the debate over abortion for over 20 years. Mark needs your prayers and financial support. Please support Mark and Created Equal by going to createdequal.net or send a check to Created Equal, Post Office Box 360502, Columbus, Ohio 43230. Your gifts are tax deductible.
That's right, you're radio activists here on WRFD. Go to createdequal.net. You folks want to go on a justice ride. You young people want to be part of a justice ride, and that is patterned after the civil rights freedom rides, the 1960s. We take kids, we put them in a bus or vans, we go on the road for a week at a time. We train them in what we call, or my good friend David Lee used to call, the seat work, that is the classroom, and then we take them out for what he used to call the feet work, which is the activist part, the outreach, and then the repeat work, which is really the most important part, and that is training people not to rely on groups like Created Equal or individuals like Mark Harrington or Seth Drayer, but to actually go on their own and be able to make a difference for Christ in the public square. So that's what I would just exhort you to get involved with our ministry here locally. Go to createdequal.net and let us know. Mark Harrington here. My guests in studio today are Dr. Cornelius Choice. He is the professor at the Abortion University down the street here. And my other guest is my good friend Seth Drayer, who is the training director for Created Equal. Let me hand this over to Dr. Choice. Dr. Choice, thanks for being on the Mark Harrington Show. Thank you, Mark. It's really good to be here again and talk to your listeners. Hopefully we're making, maybe we're pulling a few people over on my side. I don't know.
I hope not.
Well, I know Mark's listeners are pretty hard-headed, pretty narrow-minded folks who read the Bible, so that might be hard to influence them. But I don't know how I'm doing. I guess I'll listen to this later on and figure that out. But Seth, again, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Dr. Choice. I always enjoy it.
Hey, we have a cordial relationship. I call you names.
You do. I don't.
And you don't call me names.
Nope.
And that's usually how it works. So we're okay with that. But we were going to talk about this particular subject here on the last segment. Ran out of time. And that is, let me just ask this question. If a child's going to face a life of suffering, which, you have to agree that women who are in crisis pregnancy, who are usually minority, not that there's anything wrong with that, who are low income, sometimes, most often single parent, are going to, if they have this child, they're going to raise this child in a less than ideal arrangement or situation. Wouldn't it be better to spare them a life of suffering? Wouldn't it be more compassionate to allow that woman to abort that pregnancy?
I don't think so. Because the question, Dr. Choice, is not whether or not people will face suffering, but what do we do when they do face suffering? Do we seek to alleviate their suffering or to eliminate the sufferer? I think it's far greater to try to find real solutions to help people through their suffering than to kill them. I mean, the situation you just painted, that is so real. There are children being raised in environments where they're not being treated well by their parents. We could end their suffering by going to those houses and killing all those born children. What would you think of that?
No, I'm against that, as you know, and anybody listening to the program for the last 3 weeks would know that I'm opposed to that because they're real people.
See, that's the difference. You and I don't see the...
Like you and I.
Well, how do you know I'm a real person?
Well, because you're born and you're sentient.
But see, cats are born, dogs are born.
Again, you well know my position on animal rights, but
I do.
So why can't we do this? Why can't we would have millions, 40 million at least, maybe more, children living in poverty more than likely. Of course, not all would be children by now. Some of them would be adults. Who's going to take care of all them? Isn't it more compassionate that we eliminate their suffering by abortion?
Compassionate for who? Again, you are killing the sufferer. I simply say that my position is when you have someone in the life of suffering or someone who will face suffering, is it better to kill the sufferer or seek to eliminate their suffering? And all of this, we talk about children being costly, children facing suffering. What does a civil society do when they have a lack of resources, when they have people who are suffering, when they have a lack of finances? Do we start killing people? Or do we try to find real solutions? I merely say that if we know they're humans, and if all humans are created equal, we must treat born like preborn, treat them equally.
Okay, now let's get to the final subject of our last segment here and being together here for the last several weeks.
Sorry to see it end.
I know. Well, we'll do it again if Mark would be so kind to allow me back on the program. He may not after this. I don't know. But let's deal with this final question, and that is, we have millions of women in America that have had abortions. It's become a way of life, unfortunately, and it's a tragic choice, as I agree with Hillary Clinton on this one. It's a tragic thing. I'm not saying this is something we should take lightly. I don't think women take it lightly. I think women are caught in a tough spot, and there are millions of women out there like that who have decided to do this. They exercise their choice to do this, but yet they live with this the rest of their lives. Speak to them, because I think that's where maybe there's some common ground that we can say that we're compassionate towards the women who have abortions. We think they should be able to. We also think they shouldn't be guilted or feel bad about it afterwards, and if they are, they should be taken care of. What is Created Equal's position, or your position on post-abortive women who've had abortions?
Well, I would say we are uniquely positioned, not as far as organizations, but between you and I, Dr. Choice, to help those women, because we do believe in the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. If I were just to tell women, try to forget about the abortion, that's not really a solution for them. You're right, there are men and women carrying heavy burdens. I meet them all the time. When I was in Kentucky a couple years ago, I met one woman on a campus who told me that for 2 decades she carried the pain of her abortion, but never told anyone until she met me, a man, in front of a bloody abortion picture. But what I walked her through was what we must share with people who are carrying these burdens, and that is that, yes, abortion is a sin. It is a crime against God because you are killing your child. But that's not the end of the story. There is forgiveness through the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I can share that with people because I've never had an abortion or participated in one, but I've sinned against the same God that the woman who has 20 abortions is sinning against. And so we both bear guilt before an infinite God, and there's only one way both of us can be forgiven, and that is through the infinite sacrifice of Jesus Christ, the second person of the Trinity, who died on the cross and rose again to defeat death. And so when I meet a woman who's carrying the burden of abortion, I don't minimize the pain, but I say, Christ bore your pain on the cross. He said that he forgave you if you will have faith in him, and therefore you can find real healing that's not merely forgetting or hiding it, but you can actually be forgiven at the cross, and then you have an opportunity to help other women find that same forgiveness, or even to start standing with us and preventing other women from carrying that burden by never having an abortion.
So we got 1 minute left, and it may not be adequate here. Again, Dr. Choice standing in for Mark Harrington here on the Mark Harrington Show. Recently, my side, which I'm actually not very proud of this, people like Emily Letts have videoed their abortions. There is a movement to try to destigmatize this. I think it is a tragic choice. I think it's a difficult choice. What do you think of that? You got 1 minute.
I would say that what Miss Lett did was not so brave. She did not really film the abortion. She filmed herself. But there are efforts. If there is stigma on something that is good, that is bad. But again, we have to ask: is abortion good or bad? Rape is stigmatized, and that's a good thing because rape is wrong. If abortion is wrong, which is my position, then the stigma fits.
Well, in that case, I do not disagree with you. I think that. It's something we need to take very seriously, and our culture shouldn't be mocking it or making fun of it. So I think we can end with some level. We found some common ground. It's been good to be with you, Seth Drayer, the Director of Training at Created Equal, and you've been listening to the Mark Harrington Show. Dr. Cornelius Choice has been sitting in for Mark for the last 3 segments, and I regretfully say this, but you can find out more about Mark's ministry on createdequal.net. I'll turn it over to Mark. Thank you, Dr. Choice, for being on the program. We'll have you back on with Seth Drayer in the future. You've been listening to the Mark Harrington Show, the voice of resistance, Christian resistance against tyranny and evil. Your radio activist here. We'll be back next Saturday, same time, same station. And the scripture is clear. Jesus said, "Go therefore and make disciples of the nations, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded you, and I will be with you even to the end of the age." And folks, that includes the prohibition against the shedding of innocent blood. God bless you. God bless America. And remember, America, bless God.
You've been listening to Mark Harrington, your radio activist, sponsored by Created Equal. For more information on how to become a witness against the evil plague in America, call Created Equal at 614-269-7808, 614-269-7808, or go online to createdequal.net, createdequal.net. Be sure to tune to The Mark Harrington Show next time for your marching orders in the culture war.